Welcome back to Unsolicited, where we give you the unsolicited insights you didn't know you needed about working with industry, supporting government programs, and navigating the wild world of federal contracting. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation with some of our fantastic guests. Today, our guest sits at the center of one of the most important functions in GovCon, staffing. And so Nicole Decker is the Director of Recruiting for Abacus Solutions Group, where she leads the technical recruiting pipeline for cleared IT, cyber, analytics, and engineering professionals across the country. She brings an MBA-level understanding of leadership, years of hands-on technical recruiting experience, and a people-first approach to helping individuals build careers that actually change their lives. Her background spans full cycle recruiting, ATS optimization, hiring manager alignment, and the kind of candidate care that directly impacts workforce continuity and program performance. Nicole, welcome to Unsolicited.
Thanks for having me.
We're really glad to have you on. It's been fun getting to know you, interacting with you ahead of us actually starting here today. So I'm really looking forward to some of the answers that you're going to give us on the show today. So please share your expertise.
Absolutely. I'm excited to chat about it.
Well, let's get started talking first. We're in this people pressure, technology, game-changing thing that we hear in a lot of different places. And so I know that you have said that recruiting is a people-heavy business, and it is also chaotic, unpredictable, and constantly evolving. And so I want you to paint the picture for us. What does the day-to-day really look like for a recruiter in government contracting right now?
Yeah, so I would say regularly we have a moving target, right? And that's what we look at, I think, in everything GovCon, right? Is we've changed our minds. This is the new technical. This is the new technical. This is exciting. This is the bright and shiny, right? And we see that all the time. And it's the same for recruiters, right? We have this moving target from the client or from, our partners, or even sometimes from candidates that say, hey, actually, I want this, right? Because it is people centric. And so when we're looking at that and we have these moving targets, there's a certain level of chaos that comes with it as well. So when we're working with different candidates, sometimes that means, hey, I'm looking at really entry level stuff, but I'm interested in maybe cyber, or I'm really interested in, networking or whatever. But without any experience, maybe they get started in that and they hate it. Right. Yeah. And so how do we get to know somebody and start them successfully is kind of the big thing. And it's like creative chaos is kind of what I like to call it, right? It's like we have this opportunity with how great technology is today to be able to say, hey, this is where we could go with, the talent that we have, or making the talent think creatively about what they can bring to the table.
Well, I think that that's important that you mentioned, because there's a lot of folks that maybe don't yet know what some of the job options are out there. So How do they know where to start?
Right. Exactly. No, it's like saying, yeah, I want a job in IT. Like, well, do you want a job in the government too? Because we do a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options. And I think like entry level jobs is so great because oftentimes that's service desk, help desk, that kind of thing, where they can kind of get a feel for it. And then if you've already built those relationships with people and you get to know them from what they're liking, or maybe certifications that they're pursuing, right? What can we offer them next, right? If they've taken that next step with us, right?
Yeah, because when you're in a crowd and you're around other people that are doing a thing, you might learn something you couldn't have learned in a classroom, because you're hearing some of the things they're talking about. You're learning some of the things they're trying out. You're being surrounded by professionals that can give you an idea of what the landscape actually looks like.
Exactly. It's like networking, right? I mean, you don't know unless you're talking to people. And I think that, when we're talking about degrees and stuff, it's like they get a baseline foundation. how do they take that to the next level, right? And that's really where having a strong recruiting team or a strong recruiter comes into play. You know, I mean, I'm really passionate about that with my team, but also sometimes that's really competitive, right?
Yeah.
And like when I'm talking to a candidate and they're like, yeah, I had this great recruiter, so and so, but they just didn't have a spot for me. I'm like, well, I know when they do, I'm gonna probably have to kiss you goodbye, buddy.
Because you're gonna go. I get it. Yeah.
Nope, very competitive.
Right,
Yeah.
it is. But it's about building that trust with them, you know, and those expectations always have that little bit of chaos. But being able to understand what the people that you have in your pipeline can do is really important.
I think it's good. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things the government is talking about right now. And so came across a Federal News Network article where OPM's director, Scott Cooper, actually said the agencies need to overhaul how they attract tech and AI talent, and that the government is still lagging. What he actually said is that this is what the government has to do is not be the last dinosaur, right? Meaning agencies need to adopt modern technologies or risk falling behind. So I have a two-part question.
Okay, let's go.
And ask me to repeat it if I get you lost here, right? So do you see this tech, specifically AI talent pressure, showing up on on the government contracting side? And what indirect ripple effects might this modernization of hiring in the hiring environment have on the larger talent ecosystem that GovCon recruiters operate in?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit twofold, right? Because from one side, like we're talking about AI and all this tech stuff, as if that's already been adopted, right? Which, like, in some cases it has, but more often than not, in a lot of the agencies that we're seeing, like we're still pretty slow on the government side to get there, right? But I also think that's where we say, hey, here's the solution. Do we know this client well enough to say, you know what, I think we might be able to do something about this, right? And like, again, do we know if they're going to accept it? Not really, but I'm a big advocate for like shoot your shot. You know what I'm saying? Like the worst they're going to tell you is no, right? But I also think that whenever we have these talented individuals on that side and looking at the technical perspective, one side is, hey, what are we bringing to the table that the government is expecting? But then on the recruiting side, how are we using this to be more efficient? And I think that's where I have seen a huge increase, because if you're not using it now, you are already left behind, right? And when we talk about those expectations from like the government side or, you know, who we're working with, right? They don't care what tool I'm using. They care that I'm giving them something that is very good, right? A person, the talent that they need. And so in that, recruiters, I mean, we're typically, you know, a mile wide and an inch deep as far as what we're talking about. We have a vast amount of technical competencies that we have to cover. And what we typically get from like program teams, hiring managers, that sort of thing, is your skeleton. Well, things like AI help us know, okay, well, when I have this skeleton, these are the other things that are behind it. So I know when I'm talking to somebody, they're not coming up with fluff or, you know, whatever. So then we can move forward with them to send them over and know that we have this top talent, while also digging through it. And that also helps us with saying, hey, you know, here are my suggestions to you, hiring manager, on how we can improve this job description that you sent me that has nothing in it but the PWS that I already read, right? Like, like, so, hey, okay, thank you for telling me what you need in this key personnel role. Based on my knowledge and the things that I think that I need, how would you feel about us adding these, you know, other things from using AI, right, or our own research, but it makes it faster for us, which is really helpful when we're looking at all the new things coming down, right? It's hard to keep up with, honestly. And then if we're continuously having these conversations, you know, it's been really helpful in making sure that we can stay on top of our game also.
I like that you say that, and I think it's interesting too that, like, if the government is saying, hey, we're behind in hiring technical experts in a lot of these kind of fields, particularly AI, but you're saying that's not only true, but understanding as a recruiter, a hiring authority, is how do I know if they're really skilled in that thing? And you're able to utilize the same tools that you're asking them to be experts in, maybe to help you hire the right experts.
Right.
I think it's brilliant. I don't guess I've given that thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to utilize what we have at our hands, and not necessarily be the expert, right?
No, I think it's really good. And so, Dr. Cooper also noted that fewer than 10% of the federal workforce is under the age of 30. And he emphasized the need to attract early career employees to think about government as an important part of their development process. So, what are some of the ways that you have found success in recruiting younger talent to work in GovCon?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging. I will say that much, because there's a certain level of, I don't know what I want to do. And also this kind of like trust factor, like, is this something I want to get into? You know, I mean, a lot of these younger, talented individuals, see that I don't know if that's really a place for me, right? But again, I mean, like he said, we're seeing also a huge decrease in the federal workforce. And so we do have to compensate for that. And where are we doing that? And I think one thing that we have done, so Abacus has a sister company, Second 61, and it's a hub zone organization. So a lot of our work has come through workforce development with the high schools, and really marketing to those schools into, hey, this is the rural community, but these are the opportunities that we could offer to you, right? And gaining that interest for, those students to come into the industry. Obviously, it's really challenging when it comes to the barriers that we can't always control, right? Sponsoring clearances, investigations, all those kinds of stuff. We've been really lucky on my side to be able to have our own processes in moving forward with that. But sometimes it's not possible, right? I mean, if we have high level clearance requirements and we have younger individuals that have the ability, right? I mean, we look at the excellent schools that we have, and how do we get those people there? And I think that's still a barrier, but I think that we have awesome people working on it, right? Like, specifically UTSA has some great stuff going on.
So I love that you're mentioning colleges, because there are a lot of combatant commands that are looking at, hey, as our older workforce starts to cycle out, what does the future workforce look like? And some of what they're asking is, how do we continue getting young people interested in tech, IT, cyber, and what does the future of that force look like? So many of them are partnering or teaming with colleges to garner that interest in the younger workforce.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially when it comes to the younger workforce, the idea that like it doesn't always have to be this way, right? And I think we are starting to see that adaptation that, hey, ask why. Ask why, right? Like, it just because you're going into government doesn't mean what they're saying is like always what you have to do, or if the person that's been doing this for 30 years is always going to be right. And I think we have a really strong younger generation that is willing to step in, and has wanted or desired to be bought into, right? And we look at things like mentorship, right? And what does that mentorship look like with individuals who are saying, this is the path that you could take if you were asking why?
I love it. And I love that you're speaking a language that we very much believe in our organization. Is just because you found it that way doesn't mean it has to be that way.
Right.
Like, all the things we ever heard in the military is like, well, this is the way we've always done it. It doesn't mean it's the right shape going forward. What does right look like? And so I love that we're empowering young people to kind of think differently, or maybe it really is the right shape.
Right. And are you willing to accept that, right, is the other thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about bridging the gap, though, between hiring managers and candidates.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that recruiters often get blamed when things shift.
Right.
And even when those changes aren't necessarily in your control and might be coming down from programs, teams, hiring managers, how do you navigate the relationships and keep everyone aligned when the expectations aren't always clear?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is honesty, right? Like, especially when it's hiring manager and candidate, right? Because I think, especially in GovCon, it's like, we need 25 of these separate things tomorrow, and this huge thing's about to drop, and you guys got to be ready, right? Been through it 100 times. So in that sense, right? Okay, I will pipeline for you, but I'm not sending them to interview until you can tell me, what you're paying them, that this is a real job. Like, these are things that we have to have, right? And then our conversations with candidates look a lot like, hey, this is what we're expecting. Would you be interested if we were able to move forward, right? Because so much of it is building that trust of, hey, I'm going to be straight up with you. If you like this option, great. But then you also have to organize it on the back end, right? Like, I'm not going to go to my hiring manager, my program manager, when they're saying, hey, we might need this, we might need this. They're clearly shuffling not only, hey, we might need 25 people in 8 specific areas, but also everything that goes behind that. So in that sense, right, like, hey, we're going to make sure we organize who these people are, but then you tell me when you're ready, right? Hey, I have, this many people ready to interview or talk to you, right? These are the strength areas. But at the same time, right, like, I'm not going to waste their time and I'm not going to waste your time.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ask your team leads to interview all these people. And then we just all sit here and hope for the best.
So what I'm hearing is transparent communication.
Girl.
Yeah. And actual communication.
Amazing. Which, like, it's not always easy, right? I mean, like, because it is very fast paced, sometimes things get dropped, right? It's recruiters are not perfect people, but this is a human industry.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like, we do spend a lot of time working with those hiring managers to say, hey, what did you actually mean by this? And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, when they give you those skeleton requirements, right? Throwing that into your AI system. Hey, what are the other things that need to revolve around this, or what questions do I need to ask? Because sometimes it comes down to a specific system or software or language, whatever it may be, that you would know unless you were there, right? And so there's no way for a recruiter to know that unless we've asked that question, right?
Sure.
I don't want to send you 5 people and you say I hate them all, but then I didn't know that you needed C# or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. You had to be very clear on the expectations, but sometimes they don't even know what they're asking for. And so you have to get creative, because from one contract to the next, the same duty position might have way different responsibilities.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Well, and another great thing that we've done over at Abacus is, because these hiring managers and program managers and even team leads are very busy oftentimes when these heavy things come down, is we try to have consistent communication with the employees that we have hired, right? To say, hey, how's it going on the team? Right? What are things that we need to know that we wouldn't know if we weren't talking to them? And that's been really helpful for our teams to have an understanding of on the ground, because not everybody in leadership has the time to give that to us. So if we're talking to our employees that are doing it, hey, what are you seeing on the ground? What are things that maybe you're frustrated or you think the client might be frustrated with, right? That way we have this idea going into it, and it helps us recruit better, honestly, too, because then when we're recruiting and we can tell this story of, hey, this is what the people see on the ground.
Yeah.
It makes it, very transparent.
Well, and it's important too, because the government customer then knows that you're checking your own homework. You're going back and saying, hey, are we meeting the needs that the customer has laid out? Are we answering the right questions? All of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, so talk to me. I have another 2-part question for you. You ready?
Okay.
Here we go. Here we go. Okay. What does it take for a recruiter to truly understand the team, the environment, and the work that they're hiring for? And we've talked a little bit about that. I want you to dig into that. And then as agencies retool and push for newer skill sets, tech, early career, AI savvy, that kind of stuff, what misalignments do you expect between what contractors think the agency wants and what the agency is actually asking for?
Yeah, good. Okay, so I think first thing, coming into what the team actually expects, the culture, right, is having a I guess I would call it like client relationship or even personnel relationship, enough to have that understanding of what is expected, right? Because the culture of corporate Abacus Solutions Group is very different than Abacus Solutions Group working on some program, on a base somewhere, right? Like, that's going to be very different. And I think one thing we try to do is buy into that mission, right? Whether you're the recruiter or you're the candidate, right? Yes, you work for Abacus Solutions Group. Here's our values. Also, this is what you're walking into on this program, right? And these are the things that are going to be expected of you. And if my recruiters can communicate that, then our employees are going to be better off when they walk into it. And then they're also going to be able to follow better, right? Because the individuals on site, the operations teams, right? Like, they'll be able to understand that and have that full I guess I would call it like ability to follow, the leader in that sense, to be bought in, right? Because it's not always just bought into Abacus. They want them to also buy into the mission that they're serving, and then buy into Abacus because we are, feeding into them and what their goals are. And so having that transparency definitely helps, so that we, as we communicate with the operations teams, as we communicate with our team members, we gain that understanding of what was missed, what's coming, how do we continue with that. And a lot of that is, are we checking in with our people? Do we have that understanding? Are we talking to them the way that we
I
should?
love it. I mean, the simplest of things. Don't guess what the customer wants.
Talk to them.
Talk to them.
Yeah.
Find out. Make sure that, you're
Yeah.
actually heading in the right direction.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like, it comes from the employees too, right? They'll tell us, hey, this is what we're seeing. And then, just like we talk about all the time in GovCon, what's a solution that we can provide to you, right? Well, if I'm talking to people on the ground and they're saying, oh, my on-site supervisor is saying all of this and this is so hard, I'm like, oh, well, maybe we should come to the table with something, right? But like thinking out of the box with that, like that's not always something, like that's not a butt in the seat, as you would usually say with recruiting, right? So how do we take that from, hey, we recruited, we staffed, to we're developing, and that's really where we also want to see people grow.
I have a passion for human development.
I love it.
Do. So I love
Same
that you
here.
say that.
Same here.
Yeah.
That's when I first met Nicole. I was working in human development, workforce development. That's awesome. I got a question for you, Nicole. Because we were earlier on, you were talking about the younger generation, right? Getting them into tech, getting them into GovTech. How does that work? And how do you merge that with what you just talked about, with having those actual human conversations? Because the younger generation tend to like to be on their screens. How do you work around that?
It's definitely tough. I'm with you. It is definitely tough, because you want them to desire to have these conversations, right? And I think in recruiting, we see so much, oftentimes, of like pulling information out, right? And you have to be able to meet people where they are, right? And I think we hear that all the time, but that doesn't mean like I'm going to show up at the school that you're at. But sometimes if we're having a conversation, let's say I'm doing a screening, right? I have to be able to ask the questions that they want to answer. Are you going to nerd out, right? Like I got to be able to pull this information out of somebody to say, hey, you really like this, right? And how can I relate? Let's say, help desk, right? That's like an easy entry level, right? We want to bring these students in, right? And we're talking about, hey, here's this system. They probably don't have a lot of experience, but if I'm relating this to, maybe some capture the flag activities that they said that they did, or even some gaming that they're really passionate about, right? How can I relate anything that they have to build that trust so that they're now interested in, oh, this is how this is going to relate to this mission. And it's not easy at all, because like having those conversations, again, is sometimes not really a conversation. Like, like I'm a talker, so a lot of time I'm doing a lot of the talking, but having the opportunity to give them the space to build, right? And I think it's always changing, right? Depending on the student, depending on the younger generation, that sort of thing. And it's not always successful, to be honest with you, but as long as we have that door open, right, and try to bring them to the table, right? There's a seat for you here, and how can we make you successful in wanting to do this, I think is probably really big.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Nice.
It's
Thank you
good.
for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess I'm still kind of pondering on, do you see a lot of, I don't want to say pendulum swing, but that's what I mean, when the government says, hey, we're kind of looking for, or we're looking out at the future, and we're saying, like I said, tech savvy, AI, that kind of stuff. Do you see a lot of like, we're only going to do that? Like if the government, for example, says we need somebody who's like tech literate, do you see a lot of recruiters going, we need cyber unicorns? Or is there a lot of realism when it comes to hiring?
So I can only really speak for us and what we do, right? I think that we get this excitement all the time around what's super hot right now, right?
Yep.
Like cybersecurity, and it's AI and like databases, I mean, it's like goes back and forth all the time. And I think that when we say, hey, we want these technical things, sometimes it's like, maybe we should dissect that a little bit, right? Like, and realistically think about it. But I also think that that's where, like you said, we see a lot of pendulum swings, right? It's like we want really exciting, really attractive, really crazy right now, and then like, okay, actually we can't afford that, or we didn't actually anything that we have isn't going to work with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
right? That we see.
Where it wasn't even really what the government was asking for.
Right.
Like, they were like tech literate, the person that is no longer writing on paper. Like,
Yeah. So, I mean, it goes both ways, I think. But when you understand the mission or, you know, what the team is like and what the needs are, it's kind of like, why would you ask for that? Right. Hold on. Are we implementing something new? Is there something I need to know about? So, yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears just a little bit because
Yeah.
we're going to be running up to time here.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're doing great. I'm enjoying every minute of it. But let's talk about retention. You go through all this
Yeah.
work to bring in strong talent.
Right.
And I know that you've got to do some things to hang on to that talent because everyone's competing for the same talent,
Yes.
right? And so one of the biggest misconceptions in government contracting is that people leave strictly because of pay. And you've said before that the drivers of retention are deeper than just compensation. And so I recently listened to an episode of the Federal Drive with Noble Reach Foundation. They were emphasizing what keeps people long term, and they weren't focused strictly on salary. So it echoed a lot of what you said. It's clarity, communication, and feeling valued in a program. So does that match what you are actually seeing? And how does that play out in the cleared IT and technical roles that you're looking for?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's easy to blame pay, right? Like this is what we love to say, right? Just, "Oh, well, we're limited by the the labor categories, so you know, just wasn't enough pay for them." But typically, it's going to be like capitalized with something else. And one thing, you know, that is always really hard in government contracting is when you're a subcontractor, right? How do I buy into my company, right? And I talked about that a little bit. Is like we want them to buy into the mission, and the company supplements that, right? And that serves not only the personnel but also the client. And as we look at, you know, there's lots of fluctuations with pay, and there was a time, I want to say it was like last year, maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, where public sector, like commercial, was just paying a lot better, and there are still some scenarios where that is the case, right? Like public sector pays really well. And so having that challenge of this is competitive, but this is where we want you to go, or this is where we want you to grow, right? And having that buy-in of communication, transparency, this is what you're getting from us. And sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? Like we maybe aren't going to meet that mark. But also, like I'd mentioned before, right, with sometimes we lose people that we're recruiting because they have a great relationship with a different company. Their recruiter's been awesome and they find a role for them on some other program that this person wasn't originally on, right? And so sometimes you see a lot of that. But I think when it comes to pay, right, we're always going to have that challenge. It's not going to go away. But what is really important is that the individuals and the relationship that you've built with them is significant enough to them to want to continue. And that's not just let me stay on this program, but sometimes it's, hey, I've talked to this person for years and they have not taken any of the jobs that I've offered to them, but we get along great. So one of these days it's going to work out, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you say, you know, that it's not just about pay, it's about feeling like they're connected.
Right.
And I'll tell you, my experience in the military was the exact same. We had some pretty niche roles that we would throw some large dollars at to retain those individuals, and they would still pop smoke.
Right.
And half the time it was because they felt undervalued, or they felt like they weren't getting supported, or they felt like they were kind of just being pushed to go do, and then they weren't really feeling connected to the organization. Right. So do you see that stuff too? Like that if they felt like they were a part of the team, the family, that kind of thing, that they might feel like staying regardless of the compensation. Obviously, everybody wants to be paid.
Right. Everybody wants a raise. So that's no joke. But I do think that a lot of times in leadership, that requires us to reframe our message. Right. Like, and there are certain things that we can't do anything about, right? Like, hey, when the government was shut down, things were slow. Sorry, like, don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Right. And so when it came to, hey, we want to see, you know, employees doing more of training or whatever. They've sat through training, a year ago. They're doing just fine. They've already been promoted, but you want them to do training again, right? And so then your employees giving pushback. And my advice of that is, hey, instead of saying you got to do training to be a team player, say, hey, I really want you to go to this training, and I want you to come back to me with the notes of how it can be improved since you've been doing this for a year. What are the things that are being missed in this training, right? So that they feel like because they are contributing in that sense, right? And you got to think about it differently to say, this is our buy-in, right? And not just in a sense of, do what I tell you to do, but make that difference, right? And spin it differently and find a way to make it.
Give them an opportunity to feel the buy-in.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
No, I love it. So let's talk small GovCon companies, because some small GovCon companies feel like they can't compete with bigs in hiring because they're small. And so when a small GovCon company has a lot of folks wearing a lot of different hats, people might often feel like, I'm not sure if this will afford healthy retention. Yeah. And so what do you say creates a place where people want to stay if they are small and it is necessary for everyone to have multiple roles?
Yeah, and it's definitely challenging from the corporate side that we see, especially in small business, right? Is because it's all kind of tangled together, right? When you look at big companies, it's like you've got your recruiters and you've got your business team and, you've got your PMO, right? And for a small business, that's just really not the case, right? Like, hey, I talked to so-and-so. We have to have excellent communication. And that is really hard. And I definitely don't have it perfect. I know my team doesn't have it perfect, but if we can communicate and say, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I was told, and this is how, I think it affects you. And even from recruiting, there are things that we seek out, right? When I'm in a morning meeting, hey, do you have updates for me that I need to be prepared for, right? That could be pipelining, whatever. But in a sense of not being able to compete, it has to be a small but mighty strength that you can take to the table to say, hey, we're going to make a difference here. And it's really hard, to be honest, for small businesses, but you have to be around people that you trust. Otherwise, people aren't bought in, right? Just like we were talking about before, right? Like if it's like, hey man, I don't feel like you're telling me the truth, you're not giving me the information I need, then you're butting heads all the time. And it's like, nobody's having fun out here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounded like the answer kind of was the same in each scenario: trust, transparency, communication, and allowing people to feel like they're a part of the answer as much as the problem solver. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard in small business when it's just corporate wise, but then also on the program side, trying to get that buy-in, because it feels bigger, but it doesn't if they're separated, right? And they're, somewhere where we don't necessarily have a corporate office, right? Did they get that support that they need that we also need?
Yeah.
Right?
Did they feel connected?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So as we're rolling toward the end here, before we wrap this up, what I want to know is kind of like, what's your unsolicited advice for anyone in industry who wants to build trust and become the kind of partner government teams actually want to work with?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing, in my experience has been being consistent, being clear, and always being strategic, right? I think that those are the biggest three things that we look at in recruiting, because for us, if we continue to show up and we continue to thrive and over deliver, right, and ask the right questions, clients are going to trust you, right? If we ask those right questions, if we say, we're in it and we are holding ourselves accountable, then as we ask those questions, our clients know, oh, they're going to hold us accountable to these things because this is what they're asking for, similarly how they're asking us, right, for whatever specifics it is. And I think that allows that relationship building to continue to future opportunities, right?
I adore it. The fact that you said be strategic, because a lot of people try to solve the problem right in front of their face, but they don't necessarily think about the secondary, tertiary impacts that would have down the road. If they're not thinking, as our owner often likes to say, systems thinking, how is whatever you're doing going to impact other parts of the team? And if you're not thinking like that, then you're only trying to solve your problem, but potentially creating problems in other places.
Right, exactly. And if I was to say, oh, we filled, 15 seats in a week, right? Awesome. 2 thumbs up for recruiting. But then if a month later we have, 25 people leave, that didn't do any
right.
good, right? So I think as we look at that big picture, that's also an advantage of small business, right? I mean, we wear a lot of hats. We got to have really good communication. Also, if we know what we're talking about with each other, we're winning.
Yeah, because the touch points are a little closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. Nicole, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. You're a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for all of you who are tuning in. And if you want to learn more about Abacus Solutions Group, you can find them at abacussg.com. Make sure that you like and subscribe here for more unsolicited conversations about working with industry, the people behind federal services, and all things government contracting. And we'll see you next time here on Unsolicited.